Hi guys, so I will be teaching you guys how to make a program where given any picture like this boat, um, the program will actually zoom it up to whatever the user wishes. So we're asking what file we want to use, which I want to use the boat, and I want to zoom it up. Let's do 4, which is going to be square root of 4 is 2 by 2, right? So every ASCII character is going to be zoomed up 2 by 2 now. And then the name, I'll just put something random. And then that will come out with this lovely new 4 or 2 by 2 everything. So as you can see, this dot is now 4 dots. So I'm going to be teaching you guys how to make a program like this. We're going to be starting with a new project, and we're going to name it Zoom, because why not? And new class. And we're going to call this main, because we need a main class. And then we're going to need a class that pretty much does 2 things for us. It checks this zoom level to make sure it's a perfect square root, and make sure that every line that you take in from the file, every line is going to be tripled or doubled however many times. Every character is going to be doubled. So that's what we need a class to do that. So I'm going to call this class enhance because we're typically enhancing it. Okay, let's start with our main class. So we typically want this format. So how we can get started with that is starting with our main stuff that we typically put in our main class, which is going to be public static void main, and then passing string and args and then brackets. Okay, and now well, first thing we know is that we need to get a user input, right? So we need to import the java.util.scanner, and then we want to create that scanner object. So I like to call it scanner because that's just default. And we're bringing in system in from the keyboard. Okay, now what we can do. Also in this project description is if a user inputs the wrong input file name, it will say that file doesn't exist or is unable to open that file, please try again or something like that, right? So we're gonna need some sort of boolean that says, okay, is this valid? Is this file valid or not? So I'm creating that boolean right now. I'm gonna go ahead and do that. And already set it to false because that's just what I want it to be default. Is this file name valid or not? And that will keep our loop running, saying like, okay, we'll loop through this until this boolean is true. Now, off the bat, we already know we can say to enter the name of the input file to use. And then we need, of course, an input. So this is our first one. This already should work. Let me run it. So this already should work. Should be no problems because all you're doing is just printing out something and taking in an input. So, sorry guys, my voice sounds really raspy right now because I'm pretty sick, but anyways, so we also want to get the zoom level, right? So we can say so and say enter the zoom level must be a perfect square. So now we're entering in the zoom level or getting it from user input, and we're going to call this zoom scanner.next in. Easy, right? These are the two things we really need from, or we need a third thing, which was enter the output file. So let's go ahead and do that. And then let's call it output. Okay, now what can we do with this? So first thing to tackle is getting this file input. So the user has to type in the name of the file, and then you have to use that user input name to find a file that you have to have in your system. And if you don't have it, then it's going to be an error, right? So you have to make sure you have the file first. So I already did this, but I have a boat right here. I'm just copying this boat and I'm gonna put it in my Zoom class right here. So now my Zoom has a boat, right? Okay. So now we need to get that user input to essentially match like a file that you have. And how do we do this? We can do this first by starting with getting in that file, right? And how we can do this is using file input stream. So this brings in the file. I'm going to call it stream. Close new file input stream. You could also use file reader. It really depends on what you're doing, but I mean, I like to use file input streams. You actually want to do file reader when you're reading in a string of characters in this case, but I decided to use file input stream. So you off the bat have this error because they don't know what file input stream is. So you can import it like this with Eclipse. So I just imported it. And now you still have an error. That error is that it's undefined because you're not bringing in anything. So since we want the user's input to be the file name, we can put that input right here. And there's an error that says file not found exception. See, now this is the problem that we need to handle. It's an unhandled exception. So how we can handle this is by doing a try catch. So we can already put this in try. We want to try mm, pretty much all of this. So we can do all of this and put it all in here. And now we need a catch block. So catch, and we can catch some exception. And ta-da! Now our error is handled. That's right here. That might be the, oh, what if they put in a wrong file name? So when we catch this exception, we want to say, oh, this we were unable to open this. So we can put in that system out right here, and we can say unable to open, and then put in the input, the name of that file that person typed in. So we were unable to open whatever, you said, right? So next, we can get this input and we can now scan in every line of the file by saying scanner, and I'm going to call this file input equals new scanner. So this is just like the other scanner, except we are not using a keyboard input. We're going to be putting in the file input, which, what did we call it? We called it stream. So we're going to be scanning in the file. Now, this is reading in our file. And there's a lot of things we can do with this now. Now, we need to put in this scanner into some kind of variable so that we can use it for later. This is only scanning it, right? We want to next be able to figure out what the zoom level is, and it has to be a perfect square. Now, we decided we could do this in another class, which was enhance. So we're going to do this in here. So how do you determine if something is a perfect square? Well, you can use the math.square root and figure things out from over there. So we already off the bat know that we have a private static double zoom level. We have a level that the user wants to zoom in, right? And these, of course, always have to be private, and we are making it static because every line in the file that we are scanning in is going to use the same zoom level no matter what. So that's why we made it static. And now we're going to set the zoom level. So we're going to make a method called setZoomLevel. And we're going to pass in whatever right here. See, we're going to pass in the zoom that the user wanted. So int zoom. Now you decide whether or not you want to make this public or private. And I decided to make it public so that this class can use it. So public, and then I want this to be a Boolean. Now why is this? Because we're going to say that if it is not a perfect square, then return false. If it is, return true. So that means since I will be using, well, essentially if you want this other class to use this method and you don't want to make you don't have to make like an object of this class, you essentially want to make it static as well. So static means that now this class can use it without having to, you know, make a whole instance variable. Like when I say, or I mean, make a whole object, I mean. When I say make an object, I mean you don't have to say like enhance hey equals new enhance whatever, and then you have to make like a public, or yeah, a public constructor here. So we with static, you don't have to do any of that. You can just say enhance dot set zoom level. We can just say that. We can just call this method that way from main, and that makes our life a hell of a lot easier. So this method is now static, and now we're gonna say we want the square root of this variable. So it would be a double, because you never know what it's going to be, because we're testing in case if it's not a square root. So it could be like point something, right? So we're making it double. We're going to use the math.square root function, and we're going to put that zoom in there. So we're going to say, okay, whatever number you gave me, could be 1, 2, 3, or 4. I'm going to find the square root of it. I'm going to put it in level. So let's say this is 4. This is now going to be 2. So now we're going to test if this is a perfect square root number. So how do we do that? Well, we can say math.floor. It rounds off the number that is passed through. So this is essentially how you can check if something is a perfect square. you can say your level minus math.floor level should be equal to 0, right? So if math.floor rounds the number, they're saying this number minus math.floor of that number should be 0, and that will make a perfect square. So think about if it wasn't a perfect square. Like 2.5 is not a perfect square. Like 5 would be, because 5 times 5 is 25, for example. So 2.5 minus the math.floor of 2.5, which is not 2.5 anymore, right? Should be like 3 or something. It's not going to equal to 0. Whereas if it was a perfect square root, like 25, there would be 5.0 minus 5.0, because math.floor is already making it 5.0. Okay, just explaining it in case it's kind of confusing. So we're going to put this in if an if-else statement. So if it is a perfect square root, return true. If it's not, return false. So this is if it is a perfect square root. Now we're going to set that zoom level to the perfect square root. Now we don't have to do this dot because it's static, and that would be in like a non-static reference. So we don't have to do this dot in front of it. And we're going to return true. Now we say else. We're going to say if it's not a perfect square, we're going to let them know. We're going to say the zoom level zoom is not a perfect square. Boom. And we're going to turn false. So this is our method that will essentially let us know if the zoom level is perfect, or I mean setting that zoom level and letting us know in the main class if it was a perfect square, so that we can keep asking the user for their zoom level if it's not a perfect square. We can use that. And how are we going to do that? So we can say, we can do a loop actually. We're going to put it right here. So we're going to say, so do all of this while, and then we're going to need some sort of condition in here. So we haven't even called that class yet. Let's call that method. So we're going to do, what should we call it? Right. Let's call it level set, because we're setting our zoom level, right? And this is going to be a Boolean value, right? Because we're going to have to take in this one, and this one's a Boolean value. So level set, and we're going to need it to be, I'm going to initialize it outside the try catch, because I like to do things outside. That's just me. Level set equals, we're going to set it to false already. So now we can say level set equals enhance, like I was saying earlier, dot set zoom level and zoom. And boom. Now we can say, so if we say, okay, enter the zoom level, it's going to be 25, right? And then we put in 25 here. 25 goes through here. Then 25 is in here. And then we get the square root of 25, which is 5. And then 5 minus math floor 5, which is 5, equals 0. And then we will set the zoom level, and it will return true. And then the true comes back over here. This is what we just did. And true goes into level set. So now we can say while, we're going to keep looping through this while this level set is false. So if the user enters in 3, level set is false. And we're going to keep going till it's not false. Now we are done with the part where you're asking the zoom level. Now, we need to ask for the name of the output file, which we have right here. We have asking, oh, let me just do, wait, actually, let's do this. You always want to make sure you tab inside these so that it is very easily readable. So you want to enter the name of the output file. And we have this right here. And then now we need to create some sort of something that will help us write or create some output file. So we can use file writer for this. Pretty self-explanatory. I'm going to call it file write. And now error, same error as file input stream. Because we haven't imported anything, the compiler has no idea what this is. So you can go ahead and import that, and there it is. Beautiful. Now we still have an error because we haven't really given a name to whatever file we're going to output. So since we want it to be the user choice or whatever the user types in from the scanner, right? We could call this output. And now the file name will be whatever the user puts into this output variable. So now we have a file that will write out. Okay, so here is the tricky part. Now we need to actually put stuff into that file. So we created this file called whatever we wanted. Now we need to put stuff into it that has to be from our file. First, getting in that first line of the file, which I'm going to call line because it's pretty self-explanatory. So file input dot next line. This is going to grab that first line in the file. This file input is from the scanner that we created earlier, saying please scan in this file, this stream. So now we're putting that file input into this variable line. So that is already putting it in to our file writer. But what's the problem? The problem is we haven't modified it or done anything to it. We need our boat to become bigger. And the only way to do that is if we modify each line. So this is a line, this is a line, this is a line. As you can see, it's numbered right here. There's 18 lines. And here is the logic. You don't have to use array or anything of that sort. You could just go string by string by string. So if we want a 4 zoom or 2 by 2 boat, that means this character gets repeated one more time, right? Because that's 2. And then it needs to go down 2. So this character right here essentially needs to be copied once, and then this string needs to be repeated underneath one more time. And that is a 2 by 2 boat. Same goes as this line. This dot, this line, this 8, they all need to be copied twice, and then that line needs to be repeated twice, however number of zoom level there is. So we were saying how we can do this in the enhanced class. And how we can do that is by having a method that actually takes in that line. Well, we already have something that takes in that line, but the method will repeat whatever is in that line the zoom level amount of times, right? That makes sense. So we're going to call this zoom string, making it public because we want this class to use it. Okay. And once again, it's going to be static so that we can be able to use this method without having to create an object. and we're going to make it return a string because we want to make it return the zoomed string in, the enhanced version of this dot. Okay. And we're going to pass in whatever the string file line, whatever we're looking at. So we're working on repeating the characters in that line. So what you can do here is that we're looking at every single character in that string file, and we are outputting it and doubling it and then returning that string, right? Okay. So we're going to create that string that we are going to return. I'm going to call it zoomed in because that's pretty much what this string is. And I'm going to go ahead and initialize it to nothing. That way we don't have any errors. So if we're going to look through every single character of the string, you're going to want to use a loop. And since we know what number of times we want to look at each character, which is the length of that string, we can use a for loop. So I'm going to do integer I starting at 0 and less than the length of whatever string this is, or however long that string is. And then incrementing I each time. And then I'm going to now put each character essentially um, in a variable, because the only way to look at each character and to actually work with each character is to, in Java case, you need to actually look at each character and put it into a variable. So I'm putting it into this character zoom, this. And now we have this, whatever character we're looking at, could be the first one, second one, third one. I'm going to need to now put it into that string that we created, right? So zoomed in, and we want it to add on to this string. So you can say zoomed in plus zoom this. Now, the problem with this is that this is not adding on because we're only looking at one character at a time. This is not adding on each of that characters however many times, right? We're going to have to put it in another loop. So I'm going to say for j this time, because I like to use I and j. J is less than, and it's going to be however many times that the user wanted it to be repeated, right? So we're going to repeat this character now. Now we're saying, okay, look at this character. Now we're saying, okay, now repeat that character this many times, right? So less than the zoom level. And then J++. Boom. Now we said, look at this character. Now we're saying, okay, now that we're looking at this character, please repeat this character. However many times that the user wanted, we're going to increment it into this return string. Okay. And now we're getting an error because we need to return a string, which we haven't done yet. So after all this, we can simply say return zoomed in. An error is gone. Now, I'd say we're pretty much done with this enhanced class because that was our two main goals, was to set this zoom level, make sure it's valid, and then have it repeat the characters in a string. That means we can now focus on our back to our main file. We have now repeated each character in a line, right? But now we need to do it this way, which would be the repeating the line this return zoomed in. We need to repeat this line now downwards. We've repeated the characters to the right. Now we need to repeat the characters to the bottom. We can start by a loop, right? Because we know how many times we want this string to be repeated. So we do a for loop. And once again, I'm doing integer I, and I'm going to have it less than this zoom level. How do we access this private static? Well, we can do enhance dot, and we're going to have to get a getter method because we don't have anything that actually returns this zoom level. So we're going to have to get a getter method, and we can call it get zoom level. Pretty straightforward. So I guess I was wrong. We are not done with the enhance class. We still need the get zoom level method, which is pretty easy, right? Just do what we were doing before. It would be double because we were returning this double, and static so that we can access it without making an object. So we're returning zoom level. Easy. Okay, now we're done with enhance method. And now that we have this, I is less than, and this is going to return whatever this zoom level is. I is less than that zoom level, I plus plus, brackets. Now we can say, okay, this is when it gets a little tricky, right? So you can say file write, because we are writing to the file. We're using our file write. That's where this comes in hand, right here. File write dot write, meaning we're going to write to the file. And what are we going to write in here? We are going to write in line that we want to be repeated. Now we haven't gotten that line yet. So how do we do this? Well, let's create a variable for that line. We're going to call it zoomed in like we did in enhanced. And we're going to equal to, since we haven't even called zoom string, we could do enhance.zoom string and put in that line that we are taking in, right? So we're taking in the next line, we're sending it to zoom string, which is what we created here. And then we're going to store it into zoomed in, because now this line is now zoomed in. And now we're going to write it to the file, this zoomed in line to the file. And it's getting repeated however many zoom level times. So this is going down now. And now every time we do this, we have to do a new line as well, because this zoomed in version of the string does not have a new line. So how you can do that is by writing in a new line. And the way that I found easiest would be system.get property, and then you do line.separator. And this sends in a new line to that file. Now, here's the thing. This is only writing in one line. How do we get it to keep going into this file through every line until the end of the file? We don't just want to do one line, we want to do all of them, right? That means we have to go through a loop. Anytime you're incrementing through anything, you need to do a loop. So I want to put everything up until string line in here in a loop, because this you don't need to put this in a loop. You don't have to do this over and over again. You do it once, that's good. It's good enough. So I'm gonna put it in a while loop. Why is this? Because I'm going to say while each line in this file has a next line, I'm gonna keep going through this file and doubling up each line. So I'm going to be checking. Does this next line have a line? Yes. Okay. That means we can keep going to the next one. And then when you reach this one, does it have a next line? No. Okay, we can stop. So we can say while while here's the tricky part. We want to say it has the next line, but what do we choose to say that? We could say that the input of this file dot has next line, and then put brackets around all of this that we just did right here. So we can say now while this file has a next line, we are going to be repeating through every single line of this file input until there is no more lines. And of course, where there's a file right, you have to close your file. But we're going to do this at the very end of the outside the loop, because you don't want to loop every time and close it, because that will cause a lot of error in your code. So we're going to do file right dot close like this at the very end. So we are almost complete. Now that we have looped that, we also want to ask the user to keep inputting the name of the input file until a right one is a right file input has been, typed in. We can do a do while loop. We can say do this while the valid until the file name is valid. So we can do this on here because we want to keep asking this question. We can say do this, and we want to go all the way. We want to do all of this, right? Do all of this while the valid file name is false. This means we're going to keep looping through until our file name is not false, which means it is true, right? So we're saying we can keep looping. We're going to keep asking them to enter the name of the file. The only reason why I chose all of this is because the catch loop is right here. And we want that catch loop to keep asking until a correct file name has been inputted. Now we need to make sure that this isn't always false. Right? So this is where that came in when we made earlier. When is it actually true? Well, we can pick anywhere in our code where for sure if an exception hasn't been caught then that must mean that the file name is true if it hasn't been caught at that point. I'm going to choose something very far into the code, which is going to be right here. I'm going to say this is where the valid file name equals true. I could pick anywhere, but I picked in this while loop because for sure there is no way that you cannot pass all of this without running into an exception if your file name is not valid. So I picked somewhere very deep in there. Okay. I think that might be everything. Let's run over what we have so far. So we have a do while loop. Please enter the name of the input file, and we are going to bring in user input through the scanner, which is the keyboard. And we have a boolean of if the level has been set, right? And then we can say, then we said, okay, we're going to try all of this, which is putting in that name of the input file, and then scanning in the file stream, and we're going to say enter the zoom level, and we put it into int zoom, and then we called enhance dot set zoom level, which right here dot set zoom level says, okay, if it's a perfect square, return true. Else, it's not a perfect square, return false. We're going to put that into level set. And we said do this while it is false. So we're going to keep asking until the user gives us a perfect square. After we are out of this do while loop, then we say, please enter the name of the output file, and we get the user input through the keyboard. We created this object for file writer so that we can write to the file, and we named it whatever the user wishes. And we said while that file, our input file, has a next line, we're going to take in the next line. We're going to set the this file name to be true, and we're going to zoom in that line that we just took in. Then we said, which we didn't enhance, which we said, look at this character, now repeat this character. And it's repeating over and over and over again. And we're turning that string into zoomed in, saying for every int I, we are going to write into the file that same zoomed in line over and over and over again until we reach that number of the zoom level. And then we're going to write a new line as well, and then we're going to close that. And all inside of this while loop, the file name is valid. Let's test it out. Okay, so we're trying this again. Okay, we're trying this and boat, and then we're gonna let's just do B. Okay, let's try it out. All I did was change this next line to an X, but I don't think that really fixed anything, but we'll see. Oh, look at that, we have a big boat. Okay, so I put in 4, and then it outputted 4 because it's 2 by 2. Everything is 2 by 2. See our little boat right here? Now, let's try a different picture. I have this picture of this ghost. Whoa! Pretty freaky, huh? You could also do 25, but I think that's like really, really big. So I did 4 because this is a pretty big picture. But there you go. That is how you take any ASCII picture and scale it up to size.